I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Rutland City Board of School Commissioners and invite all that would like to join in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to note that commissioners in attendance, all commissioners except Brittany Kavakis, Charlene Seward, and then Courtney Collins should be joining us late. And so next item is the approval of the agenda. I have a request to pull out the project graduation from the consent agenda, and just wanted to note the plethora of minutes that are in there. So we have budget meeting from February 28th. We have building meeting from March 2nd, finance and planning from March 2nd, school board meeting from March 8th, school board meeting from March 22nd, finance and planning from April 5th, building committee from April 5th. So we're kind of have a backlog of minutes that are in the consent agenda. And then there is also an addendum on your desks to the personnel memo. So if I could have an approval of the agenda. And a second? Okay. All right, and any questions or no? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And so on to the consent agenda minus the project graduation. And so if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. So then we will take up the project graduation board donation discussion. And I believe Kevin had a question on it?
I was just looking over this, and it occurred to me that historically, in the olden days when they originated Project Graduation, it was a celebration on graduation night that was funded by, I forgot what the term was, but it was to come up with alternatives to drunken revelry on graduation night. And I noticed that this is prior to graduation on a day, and so I was just asking for an explanation of that. I got an explanation, but I think it would be good for all of us to hear what's changed.
So what we've done last year and we're going to do this year is because of the pandemic and COVID, we've moved that to a daytime event. I think also, Steve, am I right that the location isn't available as well, what we usually use?
The location is available. The primary vendor that we've used in the past is no longer in business.
For some of the interchange.
Right.
So we did this last year during the day. Steve and the team at the high school tried to develop a fun day for the kids. And you're going to do that 2 days before graduation?
Right, and yes.
So that's really the reason. We hope to get back to the way things were in the olden days. Hopefully next year.
Okay, good. I didn't want to object to spending the money, I just had a question.
Absolutely.
So do we need to, like, make a motion? Oh, you have another question?
Yeah. So on this memo, on one side it talks about stuff from 2021, but then on the other side we're getting requested for 2022. Is that just kind of us being shown what was done last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're asking for a donation of that amount.
I would move to approve the donation in the amount of $2,000 to the RHS class of 2022.
I'll second that.
All right, any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So next up on our agenda is public input. So is there anyone in our audience from the public that would like to address the board? Just crickets. Okay. So then moving on, we have our school and program updates. So I will turn it over to Isabella and Lauren to update us on our schools.
RIS character traits for April are honesty and integrity. These are certainly qualities that should shine throughout one's life. We had a tremendous turnout for parent-teacher conferences. Continuing to strengthen the partnership between schools and home is a goal of ours. After break, all of RIS will participate in standardized testing. The SBAC will be administered for literacy and math. 5th grade will also have the addition of a science assessment. We are pleased to announce that the 3rd grader, Mika Goldberg, was selected as one of 13 winners in Cassel's Waste Management Recycling Contest. And you might note that that is our old commissioner's daughter. There were 620 entries from Vermont schools. RIS also had 23 pieces of art across all grade levels selected to be displayed at Chaffee Art Center. Thank you to our art teacher, Miss Lori Kramer, for all of her efforts in making this happen for our students. Northeast and Northwest appreciated a great turnout at parent-teacher conferences as well, with more than 90% of our wonderful families participating in this important event. The Northwest character traits of sportsmanship and responsibility are the theme this month, with students learning that it's important to play fairly, learn game rules, own their actions, and treat others with respect. The Northeast character traits being focused on including courage and determination. As a part of our PBIS celebration, Northwest and Northeast star students enjoyed some soccer fun on the turf at Spartan Arena to celebrate and to work on those character traits being discussed in school. Another wonderful Children's Literacy Foundation book giveaway occurred over the past few weeks, with all Northeast and Northwest students selecting another book to call their own. Northwest and Northeast students enjoyed being part of the recent displays at the Chaffee Art Center as well. Thank you to our long-term guest teacher, Debbie Dauphiné, for showcasing our students' artwork. On Thursday, March 31st, Stafford welcomed incoming students for the 22-23 school year for our annual signing event. Students and their families met in their program areas where they signed their letter of intent to attend Stafford in the fall. It was a great night filled with energy and excitement for the year to come. During the week of April 4th, 56 Stafford students competed in the Vermont Skills USA competitions in their technical areas of study. We are very proud to report that our students brought home 14 gold medals, 16 silver medals, and 6 bronze medals. And I'd like to mention that one of our board members had a child that also won a gold.
Yes, I did.
Many of our gold medalists now qualify to attend the National Skills USA Conference in Atlanta, Georgia in June. This is a testament to the hard work and dedication of both students and instructors. Thank you.
RMS finished their SBAC testing last week. Our school counselors also just hosted their annual 4th Coffee with Counselors. This is an opportunity for parents to come in and meet with counselors to discuss different topics monthly. This week is Spirit Week, and today was anything but a backpack day. Our students were incredibly creative and brought their belongings in luggage, strollers, grocery carts, pillowcases, fishing nets, and even a kayak. Check out our Facebook page for pictures. Rutland High School is pleased to host the Global Issues Network Conference, which Sophie will speak about later tonight. We were also happy to host the Global Studies and STEM Fair in person again this year after a 2-year hiatus. 9th grade students presented their learning on the sources and transmission of electricity. 10th grade students presented their creative writing and their chosen topics from the early 20th century. Also, capstone students presented a link on their areas of research. Examples included the benefits of crying, the relationship between child abuse and COVID, and the science of resistance training. Congratulations to Ron Eisman, who was awarded a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship entitled Heart Mountain, Wyoming, and the Japanese American incarceration. He will spend 6 days this summer learning about the Japanese experience in the United States, the racism and prejudice faced by the immigrants, how their past intersected with Wyoming's Native American communities. Mr. Eisman is one of the 72 educators selected from a group of more than 270 applicants. He will receive a $1,300 stipend to cover his travel and lodging costs. This week, GMTI and OVX, two leadership council groups, are sponsoring a Spirit Week capped off by a pep rally on Friday. Spring sports have begun, and we want to support all of our student athletes this spring. Finally, thank you to the National Honor Society who volunteered their time this past weekend for spring cleanup in the RHS campus. 10 volunteers spent 2 hours and collected 18 bags of trash. Thank you. That concludes my student report.
Thank you both. Okay, so next I will turn it over to Bill. You do introductions or?
I think, yeah, so first we just mentioned the Global Issues Network conference that happened last week, and Marcia, Cassel, and Sophie are going to present.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Anderson. I'm a senior at Rutland High School. First off, I would like to say thank you for allowing the opportunity to speak tonight about the Global Issues Network Conference that took place at RHS on March 31st. This is otherwise known as the GIN Conference. The GIN Conference is an event that is connected to an international network of student-led conferences, and 2022 marked Rutland High School's 8th consecutive year of offering this learning opportunity to students. It's a day that we suspend traditional classes and explore the ways that we can apply our skills to solving challenging global issues, whether that be locally, regionally, or internationally. We focus on both the 20-some topics identified by GIN International, as well as the 17 Sustainable Development Goals described by the United Nations. While we welcome contributions from our adult and student presenters concerning all of the issues and goals, we typically organize the conference around one specific theme. In past years, we've focused on sustainability, human migration, global infectious diseases, education for all, artificial intelligence, inclusivity, diversity, and equity, consumption of resources, and this year's theme was about practicing civil dialogue, peacekeeping, and strong institutions. The document included in your packets shows the various learning opportunities that were available to students. I was invited to present my capstone research as one of the breakout sessions, as well as many of my other classmates. Other capstone students were able to present last Thursday at another one of our events, the Global Studies in STEM. We were also treated to wonderful performances by our RHS musical department, and we also had access to a special conference lunch. We ended the day with student-led listening circles, practicing civil dialogue with an emphasis on listening. As a facilitator, I think that I enjoyed this part the most out of my day because engaging in these conversations about peacekeeping on a local school level is crucial to the success of our schools and our students. It gave students an opportunity to have a voice and discuss issues that they felt passionate about. And the GIN conference was our first large group gathering in over 2 years. And while we can't take the whole school to a conference, we can bring the whole conference to a school. The GIN conference is an interactive, real-world opportunity to build our public speaking and social and emotional skills as well. Principal Schillinger, Madame Cassel, and I are here to answer any questions that you have. And Isabella and Lauren can, of course, also respond because they were a big part of the conference as well.
Great, thank you very much. Marcia or Greg, do you have anything to add or before we open up to the board?
I would add that I hope that this has kind of become culture in high school, but we've been fortunate enough to have it funded by the Rowland Foundation, and I hope that the board and the district will continue to support it after that is no longer possible.
Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation and the information. So I'll open up to the board. Any questions or comments? Kevin?
Somebody mentioned that we've had the honor of hosting it for eight years.
8 years.
If we didn't host it, what would it not happen, or would someone else host it?
We probably, at this point, it has happened for 9 years. Governor Shumlin invited us to do it 8 years ago. We have solicited help. We would love it to be a north-south or rotating conference that was collaborative. We have in the past invited other schools to participate, from Burlington to Burton and Bennington, all over. But no one has stepped up to share in the planning. But we will still strive to do that.
But are there other schools that participate?
Yes, the last 2 years, we were in person, and because we didn't know what the protocols would be when we were planning it, we didn't invite anybody from the middle school in. And we were hybrid the year before and fully remote. We were one of the only conferences internationally that kept going, thanks to our IT department. Prior to that, we would have probably 6 or 7 other schools from the region either participating or presenting as well. And we certainly will reach for that again.
When does the Rolling Foundation, is that what you said?
Rutland Foundation.
Rutland. When does their funding cease to exist?
Depends on how thrifty I can be.
Got it. That's fair.
It was supposed to last 2 years, and it has lasted us 8.
Wow.
Right now.
Okay.
It was a one-time grant, and this was our project, and we have made it last.
Kudos.
But I hope that it will be taken over at some point as part of the school culture.
Do you have the rough cost of that?
It varies depending on what we're reaching for. It can be as little as $3,000, but the year that we hosted the filmmakers that had been in the refugee settlement in Jordan, it was more like 10, because they were of some celebrity status, and also some of their stipend went back to the foundation that they, but it varies. We've been fortunate to have some really amazing keynote speakers that we have relationships with from the high school. This year we had Drew Peterson, who works for the State Department, and due to all the bureaucracy and the rules about not taking gifts from people and having to be squeaky clean and not take bribes, he was not even allowed to take a stipend from us because the red tape of the State Department. We did pay for his travel, so that was inexpensive.
We gave him lunch.
Usually the largest expense is in keynote, but certainly there are material supplies that are involved as well.
Well, I just wanted to say hats off. The amount of work that goes into planning this event. I mean, every session is an event, a huge, incredibly impressive event, and the students travel from one session to another. So every student gets to hit every session, and just the amount of planning that goes into it, just thank you. It's incredible. I would encourage all the board members to check it out next year, because it's really impressive.
We'd like to think it's a bona fide conference that an adult, a professional adult would enjoy, and we offer it to our students.
And it is, yeah. Kevin?
So is this something that all the students participate in, or?
Yes. Everyone, it's considered a school day. It's just a non-traditional learning opportunity, and we offer something for everybody who comes to school that day. They pre-register. In the past, we've also offered an opportunity to do service learning that day for students who may not want to sit and hear. Again, because of COVID protocols, we have rescinded that for now, but that's also an opportunity where we go out and make a difference that day.
One suggestion, that day, of course, when I was bringing my child to school, there had been some talk about the parking lot was looking a little more empty. Some children take the opportunity to use it as a day to skate out of school. Perhaps there could be some kind of incentives for them, like extra credit or I'm just thinking outside the box to encourage these children, because it is a wonderful opportunity that they don't look at it as a day to hit the ski slopes.
Yeah. We do offer raffle prizes for students who stay the whole day and turn in their passports. In the past, some of the classes would make it a relevant experience and weave it into the curriculum, but we do struggle with that. We hold it on a Thursday as opposed to a Friday to try to minimize that, but it is something that we do struggle with.
Maybe have an alternative though, if they are not in attendance, that they have to do a research assignment or something in lieu if you aren't able to make it. Just thinking that might be a wonderful incentive to come.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think part of the challenge with that, Tricia, is that we're trying to get back into the routines of this is how we do this after 2 years of disruption. And I was going to say that Marcia might know, and I think still the only public high school that does this in the world. There's a number of these.
I mean, there's a school in Washington State that has taken up the challenge. I don't know what their status is, whether they're private, public, or a combination of the two. We have been invited to participate remotely on the first Saturday in June with them, and they would like to collaborate with us, but I don't know what the status is. We were the only public school that I knew of. Even the other two, there was one in San Francisco and one in DC, were private schools that we are.
So there's a number of them that occur around the world.
Around the world, but there were only 3 in the United States. And we have been to 2, actually. We went to one in Quito, Ecuador, and one in Lima, Peru, to kind of check this out.
It's a great event. Thank you for running it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for
Thank you.
talking to us about it and hosting the wonderful event. Okay, perfect. So next up, we have the Allen Street report. Good evening.
I have such an easy job tonight. So I'm here to introduce Audrey, one of our fabulous Allen Street campus students, and Scott Corbett, director, who are going to give you some information about Allen Street.
Thank you, welcome.
Good evening. Welcome. Allen Street Campus is an experiential therapeutic program serving grades 5 to 12 of the Rutland City Public Schools, consisting of highly trained teachers, counselors, and paraeducators. The staff engages students in academics, social emotional learning, and healthy living activities. One of our goals is to continue working towards an inclusive school environment where all students feel supported intellectually and academically. Students are extended a sense of belonging in the classroom, regardless of identity, learning preference, or education. Would you like to share your experiences?
Sure, Scott. I'm constantly encouraged by hardworking staff and peers which help me achieve my goals both in and out of school. By getting what we need academically accomplished, we are presented with opportunities to participate and take advantage of fun things within our community and state. For example, the first time I went downhill mountain biking, I was terrified to say the least. I was hesitant, but after lots of encouragement from my peers, I went for it and found that it was something I was not only good at, but I also enjoyed. It was a great opportunity to grow.
We've increased collaboration activities with RIS and RMS classes. My favorite is definitely watching Allen Street Campus, as students focus together on skateboard instruction. Witnessing their progress weekly was a pretty amazing feat. Another goal of ours is to continue to embrace a growth mindset through experiential learning, both on and off campus. Experiential learners engaging students in hands-on experiences and reflection. They are better able to connect theories and knowledge learned in the classroom to real-world situations.
So, I learned from Cal's class that composting is an essential step in being able to provide healthy and sustainable soil. By producing our own compost from the food waste, we found a great way to improve our land in the process. After our lesson, I was motivated to get involved, and now I'm part of Cal's composting crew. I'm doing a better job recycling and composting at home as a result. And unfortunately, Allen Street campus has temporarily lost its fabulous classroom views after a recent act of vandalism. Thankfully, no one was injured in the incident, and we were able to continue safely at ASC without any interruption. Even though the vandalism took an emotional toll on everyone, we adjusted to the lack of natural light and focused on our collective vision of positive change. We are grateful for the time and effort put forth by the Rutland City Public School staff that made sure we had a safe and clean school to return to within hours of the incident.
Currently, the staff is busy building what we call the Essential 9. We don't have a real name for it yet, but it's a process of building a specialized curriculum that infused lessons under the framework of Vermont's portrait of a graduate. Our goal is that every student, every day, will leave with an academic experience that will build a well-rounded community level. We'll begin implementing the Essential 9 this school year. Some examples of the Essential 9 would be financial literacy, communication, rights, problem solving, health and wellness. We are currently growing hundreds of perennials indoors to grace our grounds this spring, and eventually mature to attract pollinators. The pollinators will support edible landscapes and are a key component of the health of our campus. In the future, ASC will provide organic produce options as well. ASC will continue expanding our outdoor program with increased focus on skateboarding this summer. Skateboarding is an accessible sport that increases focus and builds resilience, no matter your age. At this time, can we cue up the video, please?
Yeah. So board members can watch it on TV up there. All you're going to do is hit that, and you're going to do it on
Allen Street Campus is a grade 5th through 12th therapeutic program within the Rutland City Public Schools that is designed to push boundaries and build healthy relationships within our community. Staff at AFC has found ways to engage us in experiential learning opportunities while building a stronger and healthier school community. Our 21-22 challenges were to continue building relationships, expand experiential learning, focus on our health, grow our mindsets, and build equity. I know we are beating the expectations set in September because I can feel the vibe and see improvement. We take composting very seriously at ASC. This year's community partners and our students completed insulating compost bins for year-round composting. We are extremely proud of our reduce, reuse, and recycle program at ASC and will continue to find ways to lower our impact. We'll also be hosting our first Health and Sustainability Fair in partnership with Rutland 350, Arson Skate Shop, Come Alive Outside, Rutland Parks and Rec, Cassel, and Rutland County Solid Waste.
Many of my peers have found it difficult in the past to receive an education due to repetitive teaching style. I can honestly say that before Allen Street Campus I wasn't very interested in my academics or my future. I've learned that lack of motivation can be a big problem when it comes to achieving your academics and life goals.
Our school takes a lot of pride in teaching students how to enjoy all Vermont has to offer and fully supports all of our interests.
Wrap up, you need to be really careful about your sites, right?
We would like to thank the school board, administration, staff, parents, guardians, local organizations, community partners, and the entire community of Rutland for your support. We will continue to make you proud. I can't wait to see what the next school year brings.
I hope you enjoyed our 2022 ASC video. We would like to invite you to our first listening session on the environment Thursday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Allen Street campus. Please consider attending, adding to the discussion, and making an impact in our community. Thank you, and if you have any questions, it's on this guy.
I have a question. Number one, I will say I love the music track, and seeing the kids have a lot of fun makes me maybe want to go back to school, which is quite unusual. But you guys actually go up to Bald Mountain and do the trail clearing regularly?
We actually practiced with schools. They came to the school and we had a free ball and we practiced there and we were able to take that and
Well, thank you, because I'm up there all the time, and it's just there this morning, and hopefully you guys will get back up there with the saw, because we need it. Thank you.
Stephanie?
What was Thursday?
So Thursday, we are having a listening session on the environment from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at our school campus.
This Thursday? Okay.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
report.
Thanks, Allison. I wanted to let the community know that the EPA has a committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they, for the past few seasons, have asked that we highlight and publicize some guidelines for athletic participation in special leadership. These are going to be read at games before these games start. But they really emphasize sportsmanship and safe playing environments. And they're requesting that players, coaches, fans never demean coaches, players, or referees. Demean or disrespect. They're really focusing on hate speech. There's been some instances that have happened across the state, and some bad behavior in different events, especially in the fall season. So they're saying if that sort of thing happens, it's possible that they would end the game. It's possible that they would suspend either players or coaches or fans, or actually ban them from coming to games, or possibly play games without fans in attendance. So I don't think we've had. I think our fans really are quite good when I've been at games, and our players are good as well. But we want to make sure that stays in the front of our head. We're not making that kind of mistake. Ultimately, the BK is looking for respect and safety for everyone. So that's my announcement for this. But you'll see this if you're going to games. I mentioned Skills USA, and so I don't know if I have to say anything more about it other than I passed out all the different students who were recognized. And it's a wide variety of skills. It's a lot of kids from Stafford. That's the Vermont competition. So those students at the gold level now will go on to present for there. So congratulations to those students. That's a great accomplishment. We mentioned also the Global Issue Network Conference. I just wanted to thank personally Foreign Service Officer Drew Peterson, class of 06. He gave a great talk to the kids, and then he did a follow-up presentation for people who signed up for that, and he was really, really interesting. I remember him as a student years ago, and just same as he ever was, just really interested in the world, and he had a great sense of humor, so that kind of all showed again. We to see him grow and do great things in the world. We are really happy to see some of these in-person events come back. And I want to thank the staff and the students for making this happen. So, for instance, when we're talking about the gym conference, a lot of work went into that to make sure that it was safe and a good event. We hope to keep on bringing these things back. We mentioned that the Stafford had the signing night that night. We've had some great concerts, some great plays happening over the last few weeks. So thanks everyone for coming back to doing the work of making this happen and showing the good work of our kids and our students. Really good to see. We mentioned OVX. OVX is Our Voices Exposed. That's an organization that's statewide, happens in different schools, and it's kind of student-led with the guidance of staff members. And the focus is on educating students on the dangers of vaping and tobacco use. And what I wanted to mention was that at Allen Street campus, they were recognized, OVX has an annual awards recognition. And Allen Street was recognized for their OVX group for the group with the greatest engagement. That was the title of the award. And there were only 4 schools that were recognized, so that was a real compliment to Allen Street and advisor Betty Hughes, who leads that group. So congratulations to that group and the staff. I want to highlight, as far as legislation, we talked about the wage study repeatedly through the last at least a year or so more. And I think Allison and Ted are going to talk about that again, so I'll hold that off. And last, I just want to, can I ask Melissa Connor, are you way back there?
Yeah.
She's way back there. Come on up for a second.
Walk-up song.
I wanted to recognize Melissa for who's Director of Stafford Tech. She was recognized by the VPA, the Vermont Principals Association, and the Vermont Association of Career Technical Education Directors. She is the 2021-2022 Vermont CTE Director of the Year. In the press release, it was noted that Melissa has demonstrated statewide leadership, vision, and mentorship to all of us, as well as leadership in keeping the students' best interests in mind. So Melissa's going to be recognized this summer at Killington at the Grand when the VPA has their annual conference. It's a great recognition to be able to be the tech director of the year. It doesn't happen very often, so personally.
Bill knows I like to be behind the scenes. You know, as I said, it's really a recognition for the whole staff and the student body of Stafford. We've got a great group there. They make my job easy. But thank you.
Congratulations.
That's it. Okay, so next on the agenda are our committee reports. So we'll start with the building committee report from Kevin.
Okay, I'm new to this.
It's the old one. You got some minutes.
So I'm just supposed to like summarize what we talked about at the last
Yeah.
building meeting?
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, you have the last, I think.
Okay, we met last week. We got updates from Glenn about the project at Allen Street in addressing the vandalism that happened there. And also there's gonna be the city has to replace a culvert on the edge of the Allen Street campus, and so we're gonna have to approve an easement in order to do that.
We already did that.
Already did that? Oh, that was in the
Consent agenda, yep.
That was so easy.
Exactly.
All right.
You worked so hard.
All right. There was also, right, we talked about the Green Schools Initiative, about what we're looking at potentially doing in terms of rainwater treatment if necessary. There's also ESSER facilities projects, like the replacement of carpeting and those kinds of things. If you're interested in details, the minutes are out there, or you can ask me about them. Oh, and there's a surplus equipment sale. So those of you who are into large-scale yard sales, this may be the thing. That will be coming up in the near future, so stay tuned.
Just to add to that, we were gonna get the list of the items that are gonna be put up on the surplus sale. None of the items have a value of more than $5,000.
Any pieces of carpet? I'm just kidding.
No, but there is a lawn tractor that has no engine that works.
Wow.
It's magical.
Yes.
Okay. And then back to back, Kevin, because now you're switching policy.
The policy committee, oh yeah. So
You have some first readings.
I'm no longer the policy committee head, but we went over some policies largely in the administrative section of our policies. Policies 4110 through 4230. Not extremely exciting stuff, but if you're interested, look it over. It's mostly clarifying language and simplifying language. And I must admit, we spent a whole lot of time on the policy that it was involved in how to abolish a position, which hardly ever happens, so it's not the best use of time, but we got that clarified, I think. So if you have any questions, let me know. And this is a first reading, so this will come back around next week, right? I mean, next month.
Yep, next month, yep. So for the new board members, all the policies that come out of the policy committee come before the board for a first reading. Then they have to come for a second reading, and at the second reading, that's when they're approved. So in the meantime, if there's any issues, they can, tonight someone could request something to go back to committee or further discuss on the side at the next policy meeting before the second reading. So
I just
Yes.
clarify something. So, we have been talking about, changing the meetings to bi-weekly as opposed to monthly. And I wasn't sure, we talked about it, I know at the last meeting, and I think it's still in policy committee. So will that be discussed at the next meeting or a policy?
Interestingly enough, I'm no longer the chair of the
Oh,
policy
okay.
committee, so that's, yeah, I
Talk about
think
it
so.
at the next meeting.
Okay, did you
Yeah.
get any feedback, from the other board members?
You know, we had people express opinions both way, but I don't think anybody was really too strongly advocating for one or the other.
So yes, that's still in policy,
Yeah,
the 26th. I think it was unofficially discussed the previous time
Yes.
and then referred, so.
yeah.
Thank
the
you.
reorganization.
Absolutely. Okay, and so the last committee report is finance and planning, so Kathy?
So we had essentially two topics that we talked about. The first was leasing of buses, of new buses, and then also obtaining a new audit service. So I'm gonna turn that over to Ted. He has all of the details. The discussion about the buses centered around whether or not we could even possibly lease 4 buses. So, which would be great.
All right, thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. In terms of the two topics, as Kathy mentioned, some of you may know that the district typically purchases or requires 2 buses per year. The idea being to have a rotating schedule to enable the district thereby to evenly balance its purchases from year to year. But given that interest rates are as low as they are, of course they've been rising, but they're still near historical lows, we began to discuss with the Finance Committee the possibility of leasing to buy rather than paying 100% right up front. And of course, if any of you have ever leased an automobile, for example, you know that basically you're spreading the payments out over either the life of the vehicle or the life of the lease, which makes it sort of a pay-as-you-go basis as opposed to completely pay up front. So why would we want to do that? Why would we want to spend extra money in terms of interest expense to lease rather than just buying outright? And one reason is flexibility in cash flow. So, for example, each of these buses costs about $95,000 a piece, plus or minus, given some additional equipment we put on. So you're talking about roughly a $200,000 purchase. If we were to lease these 2 buses over a 5-year interval, for example, and we typically drive the buses for 10 years, then the annual payment would be $60,000. And so the district would save about $140,000 to $150,000 in cash flow this year, which then could potentially be redeployed by Glenn and the facilities group to some other high priority projects that weren't necessarily in the budget, and one of those would be a roof repair, which Glenn and his team are very anxious to do before there's more water damage. So that's how we got into this consideration. Just so you'll know, the arrangements we've worked out are with a company called Municipal Leasing Consultants, and they're a very well-regarded national firm. They've actually helped the municipality, the city of Rutland, with arrangements to recently lease a $450,000 fire truck. So we know that they're a stand-up firm with a lot of good connections. And when we asked them for a quotation, they quoted us a 3-year interest rate of 2.8% and a 5-year interest rate of 2.9%. And just to simplify that for you, what that would mean is over, say, a 5-year lease for 2 buses, since that's basically the same interest rate, that would cost the district about $1,000 of interest expense per year per bus over those 5 years, which is additional expense, but it would be relatively modest. Just for interest's sake, no pun intended, those interest rates, we're currently locked for about another week at those rates that I just quoted. But if we were to make the call today, the interest rate wouldn't be 2.9%, it would be 3.5%. So rates have gone up over 0.5% just in a few weeks, and I would be willing to hazard a guess that if we make the call in another month or two, the interest rate could be pushing 4%. So it's still favorable, and we thought that we might go about doing that. And it's interesting because the Finance Committee discussion went around from potentially leasing 3 buses to maybe only leasing 2 buses, and therefore saving some interest costs, to maybe actually leasing 4 buses because the relative cost is so low. And again, it just gives the district a little bit of extra flexibility in terms of managing its cash flows. So at the end of the day, when I spoke with Bill, we recognized the fact that the board has actually only approved the acquisition of 2 school buses. So we would plan to go ahead with leasing those 2 school buses and then potentially come back to the board in another month or as soon as we can to say, Glenn recommends from a facility standpoint acquiring 2 additional buses, which is of course 4 instead of 2, more than usual, but the rates are favorable, the prices of the buses are still favorable, but going up, and the lead times to acquire the buses are extending. So for example, these 2 buses, which the board has approved, we placed the order in early February. They were scheduled for delivery in August. They may come a month or 2 early. But when we asked, okay, if we want to order the 3rd bus, would that be available in August too? No, January of 2023. So there's an interest in saying we might want to get ourselves in the queue because we could turn around and find out the bus arrives early, or we could find out it's another 6 months. So we're dealing with an uncertain environment, but the cost to do so is not significant. So we're going ahead per the Finance Committee's agreement to lease the 2 buses that the board's approved, and we're likely to come back to you in another month or so with a proposal to at least consider 2 more buses, depending upon what those rates look like at the time. And if we can lock something in the 3.5% range, for example, we would likely recommend that the board consider doing that. So let me stop and ask if there are questions about, our acquisition of buses and that sort of thing. But I don't get to pick it.
Karen, and then Kevin.
My question was, you typically order 2 buses every year. The fact that those other 2 buses would not come in until next year would mean that would satisfy the buses for next year. So you wouldn't be coming back for 2 more.
That's true. But what we would do, you're exactly right, Karen. Thank you for making that point with the lead times. But what we would do is to seek board authorization now so that we could place the order.
Correct.
Which, if we're lucky, will be delivered in early 23.
Right.
Thank you for that clarification.
So my question has to do with the term leasing. Now, when I think of leasing, you lease a car for a certain number of years, and then it's not yours. You
Then
have
you
to
give
give
it
it
back.
back to that. Are we doing the same with the buses?
So another term would be, this is called lease to own, or another term would be simply financing. And the reason why this works out from a favorable standpoint is because this kind of financing is tax exempt for the investor, since we're a nonprofit. And investors are always looking for higher rates of return and relatively secure investments. So on a comparative basis, this interest rate still looks pretty good to them relative to other investments and gives us a benefit. But you're right, we would own the buses at the end with no additional payment required to acquire the buses. Sometimes your car lease might say, well, you're done at the end, but if you want to purchase it for $5,000, you can. That's not in the terms at all. And that's a great question, so
Okay.
thank you for that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Anyone else? Stephanie?
So I'm just looking, so, because you predicted that the interest rate was gonna go up, and it did.
It was a wild guess.
It was a pretty accurate
Even
wild
without
guess.
a crystal ball, right.
Without the
Yeah.
crystal ball, so the next, so the next finance meeting is May 3rd, so will you have kind of all the information ready to go at that point, so there can be some sort of discussion on that day, so we can.
Yes, that's what we anticipate doing. We're gonna get another quote from municipal leasing, and assuming that the rate is, not increased too much, we'll ask them to lock that rate for us, and then we will come back to the Finance Committee and the board, and ask if you would like to proceed with doing 2 more buses.
Is it something that we can vote on tonight if we say, if you can make a phone call and if it's within this rate to this rate? Can we have him go ahead and
Well,
If,
Or we have to go.
Even
so
if-
we would have to give hypothetical maximums, and we would have to vote to suspend the rules, so, but it could be done, absolutely. If you wanted to
I
say
mean,
he could spend up to this amount and engage
If
in.
the interest rate is
up-
within,
up to
you know,
this.
up to X, Y, Z. Like,
Although, the RFP, is that RFP?
So, thank you.
You need a new one?
I wanted to go there. So we invited bids from various vendors for 2 or 3 buses. And since we received the bids, the prices have gone up. So technically speaking, to follow correct procedure, before we go on the 4th, we need to go back out again with a new RFP and just give all of the vendors another opportunity to say, what would be your price today? And then determine who's the least cost vendor.
Can we request that tonight, so then we're not waiting until the 3rd?
We're gonna go ahead and ask,
You're
we're
gonna go
gonna
ahead?
send the RFP out anyway.
Okay.
Because we can do that without board approval, we just can't make any commitments
Okay.
without your approval. So
And if it turns out to be a time-sensitive matter, we could
Well-
always have a special meeting just simply on that topic,
Just-
too.
That sounds good, and you know,
So
another
let's say
reason
interest
why.
rate like double in the next month, and it, like, the whole purpose of, like, our big discussion last week was, you know, the great interest rate, and hence the reason going to a 4th bus, so, okay.
These rates, but you know, and even if the rates do move up, say by half a point, it's not gonna change the overall cost too dramatically, especially because we've locked these 2 buses in already. I will tell you that Glenn is excited, I'm speaking for him since he's not here, he can't defend himself, but, one of the other benefits is, gas mileage. Because as you would anticipate, the newer buses are more fuel efficient, and when you're paying $4 and $5 a gallon, that can contribute to operating savings for the district as well. So lower maintenance, lower fuel, it makes a whole lot of sense to move forward.
And perhaps you could forego the Bose speaker system to save some money?
We cut that out already, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we kept the Wi-Fi hotspot, if that's
Oh,
okay.
perfect.
Any other questions from the board? No? Great, thank you, Ted.
Okay,
Don't
and
go
then,
far.
And then the other topic that we discussed was a request for proposal for annual audit services. As some of you may know, our longtime auditor, O'Brien Shortle, has decided that they did not want to renew the engagement for another year. At the same time, they did give us recommendations of other audit firms that do a greater proportion of their work in this school district space. I think at the end of the day, it came to a point where we were a small portion of their business and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But they did recommend a couple of firms, and so we're putting out a request for proposal actually to about 10 or 12 firms, because this is an opportunity to kind of cast our net a little wider and see what services we might be able to get. The first firm that O'Brien Shortle recommended was Sullivan Powers and Company, which happens to audit the municipalities' city financials. And Mary Markowski, the treasurer, has been very happy with their services since they were engaged in 2017, so we'll be inviting their bid. Another firm, Plodzik and Sanderson, was recommended by O'Brien Shortle. This firm also is a full-service Vermont-owned firm, so we'll be inviting them, as well as a very well-known company, R.H.R. Smith, which audits about 50% of all the school districts and systems across the state, including all of the districts around us, like Rutland Town, Barstow, Slate Valley, who are all very pleased. And we're going to include about another half a dozen companies. We'll see what we get back. We'll review that with the Finance Committee, and then once the Finance Committee is satisfied, we'll come forward to the board with a recommendation of the action item. So that's what we have on the audit, unless there are any questions.
Absolutely. So, all right.
Nice
Thank you,
to-
Ted.
for the next
You're
round.
gonna stay there. You're in the hot seat still.
Okay, that's great, I appreciate that. So this is one of my favorite topics, as many of you know, because it can make a very significant financial difference to this district over the long term. So a number of us in the administration and on the board have been participating to support the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity and advocating for legislation that would basically implement very specific recommendations that were made back in December 2019 by a study commissioned by by the legislature and led by Professor Tammy Colby of UVM. And in that study, they came out and they observed that the weights, the various weights that are used in calculations that determine how to allocate funds to all the school systems across the state are more than 20 years old. They were not representative of current situations. They needed to be updated. Professor Colby and her team ran statistical analysis and regression models. They came up with new weights. They said, here you go, all set to go. Well, except that there were a number of people around the state who wanted to raise a few questions that went beyond the scope of that study. So where we are today is a task force that was commissioned by the legislature issued a report in December after working for a period of 6 months to develop a plan. They had a bifurcated recommendation. They said, well, you could either implement the weights as recommended by UVM, or you could go off entirely in a different direction and use a categorical aid approach. And that categorical aid approach basically would be one of fixed grants that would take the form of an annual grant per student, per category. So for example, in the case of English language learners, they would set up a grant, a pool of money, and then say every district who has an English language learner is going to receive X thousand dollars. Maybe it's $25,000, maybe it's $10,000, to be decided. And that is part of the problem with this approach. It has not really been vetted as far as a lot of people are concerned in terms of how it would be implemented. It would be very complicated. It would be very inequitable. It's called, ironically, the cost equity formula, but in my opinion, that's a grand misnomer because it is anything but equitable. It sets a standard cost per student anywhere in the state, which means that even though the costs in Rutland City may be at this level and the costs of Burlington may be at a different level because teacher salaries are different, service costs are different, there would be one average, which means some people would be getting paid too much and some people would be getting paid too little. So I don't understand why they want to go in that direction, but the House Ways and Means Committee is currently contemplating a step in that direction and away from the recommendations of UVM. So needless to say, the coalition and members like myself have been very active in communicating quite clearly with the legislature that we believe this would be a step backward. What's interesting here is the fact that there's obviously a big gap between where the Senate bill would go and where House Ways and Means is talking about. So how they are going to resolve that during the legislative session, I have no idea, but a lot could happen and change between now and the end of the session. So we'll continue to monitor it carefully, continue to, voice our opinions about going with the empirically and scholarly based approach that was recommended by the study, and we'll see where that goes. But we're hopeful that the ultimate legislation will be closer to what the Senate has recommended than what House Ways and Means is considering.
Great, thank you, Ted. And just to add on to your point about the inequity, also the cost equity model, not only is it not equitable, but it is basing the spending based on our current average in a system that we commissioned a study to say is inequitable. So we're taking what was inequitably spent and saying, well, that's the average, so that's what you need, and working backwards from there. So another reason it's inequitable.
I just had a question. So under the Ways and Means, that would not even take into consideration students who may need extra help, maybe in social learning. And if you're taking English, for example, probably everyone in the entire school takes English, so that doesn't take into consideration that at all.
So it's a great question, Karen, and it depends on how you define takes into consideration. Because I've got a spectrum in my mind that says fully addresses and takes care of versus I've thought of it but I'm not doing very much. Okay, and so what they would end up doing is they would say, oh, okay, if you have this many students who are coming from families of low income based on a poverty metric that's to be determined, And any metric is gonna have its issues, but you pick one, you decide to do it right. So if you have this many students who are coming from families deemed to be of low income, we will give you X $1,000 per student for that number of students. I've got 100, I'm getting $1,000 per student, it's $100,000. That's it. And what it does is, which is a very insidious effect in my opinion, and that's a strong word and I'm using it intentionally, is it would effectively take control away from the local school boards, the local administrations who have responsibility for making budget choices within, in our case, our $58 million. And it would say, no, you can only spend this money for that. You can only spend this money for that. And the people in Montpelier would be the ones determining what that amount is. So this is a paradigm which would take a lot of local control and move it up to the state capitol. I don't know why those legislators, as smart and experienced as they may be, feel they would know better than the parents and the board members and the constituents. That has yet to be explained to me.
Ted, what can we do to help? What can we do? I know, Allison, you had sent something around last week. I mean, what else can we do to help you?
I appreciate your asking that, and the answer is anybody who is interested is welcome to participate in any of the weekly meetings of the coalition. What we tend to do is, as we track the issues, we advise people who are on our mailing lists. This is what's happened recently. We would encourage you, if you would agree, to contact the Speaker of the House, to contact the Ways and Means Chair, and to let the voices be known, because obviously at some point they need to be responsive to their constituents, and the more of them they hear from, the better. Another thing, I'm glad you asked that too, because another thing that has happened recently, Mary Beth, is that the Rutland City Board of Aldermen and Alderwomen, recognizing the importance of this to our community financially, has passed a resolution, a city resolution, in favor of adopting the UVM study. So there are other people who asked that question, and that city resolution is going right up to the legislature. But I'll send you a link, and if anybody is interested, please send me an email, and we'll make sure you have the information that you need to go to their website, for example. There's a wealth of information. It's very informative. It's a complicated subject, but if you take it in chunks, you really can break it down. And we'd welcome all voices and support.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Tricia.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to.
So if in fact they were to go with this one that you're saying you feel is a step back, this might be putting the cart ahead of the horse, but have they come up with any kind of way that they'd be tracking for positive outcomes and showing that this system is actually beneficial and working? Because it's going to be given to us if we were, economically depressed, and how are we going to show overall that children are in fact doing better?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that. So, the Senate version of the bill, S-287, is as best I can recall, but I'm not 100% certain of this. I know when they were talking about the bill, they were talking about setting up an audit mechanism to, several years out, begin to track the results. I don't recall whether that provision ended up actually in the bill, but that point has been a matter of discussion. People are looking for accountability, and at the end of the day, it's results. Is it making a difference? So I would hope that such a provision, such a functionality is included in whatever the legislation will be. But I do want to back up one moment and say that what concerns me about the so-called cost equity formula is that there is a lot that would need to be worked out in order for it to be administered properly, which is why I said at one point in one afternoon of testimony, I said, if you break it, you own it. You better be really sure of what you're doing before you make a dramatic departure off in a brand new direction of average cost per student across the state. The only problem with measuring the results after the fact is that it's after the fact. And my concern is that while that's a good thing to do, you want to make sure that up front you've done the right thing and you've studied it and you've vetted it thoroughly, because why would we want students to potentially lose ground for a few years before we figure out where they are? I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that.
So the website CVTSE, Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. You can shoot Ted or I an email, and you can get on the mailing list, so even if you can't attend the meetings, you can get the weekly updates of what's going on, and CVTSE.
I mean, if I had my
.org.
brothers, I know everybody around this table is extremely busy with many high priority issues, but as I say to Bill, the number one priority that I can have as the chief financial officer to make the biggest difference I can for this district's financial soundness is to be involved in this, and to the extent that any of you in spare time can go to the website that Allison mentioned and begin to learn more about it, it's really critical for us. It could either rectify a lot of challenges we've been having for 20 years, and we've dealt with remarkably well. I mean, it's incredibly impressive what this district has done, in spite of not being adequately funded by the formula. But if it doesn't work out right, we could be facing a lot more challenges, and an ounce of prevention's worth of every cure, right? So thank you so much for listening and for your time.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda, unfinished business, is the board reorganization update. So in everyone's packet is an information sheet, so make sure your information is correct on there. And then the back side of that is the committee assignments. And on the back side of our agenda has our upcoming meetings. So you'll see the building committee and finance committee typically meet the first Tuesday of the month. And policy meets the 4th, so those are our upcoming meetings there. Staff relations is as needed.
So Ted and I spoke earlier, him and I said, we set a meeting for May, and I sent Sherry an email like a little while ago, May 17th.
May 17th?
At 6 o'clock.
Okay, for staff relations.
Yep. Staff relations.
Okay.
Put those on your upcoming, as it gets closer, the warnings will go out and Sherry will send the
Like I
email.
said, I sent her an email at
Okay.
6:15.
Perfect. So, then the other, committees there, so that's our board committees. Then we have liaisons to the city pension, which will be the members of the finance and planning. And you and Ted might be able, is it quarterly or not even quarterly they meet?
Used to be quarterly.
Yeah, so that's kind of,
I was on that committee, and I have 2 meetings in a year.
yeah, so that's not too frequent. And the athletics and activities, that meets quarterly, and that is, the board has positions on school committee. And then the school liaisons as listed, those work individually with the schools and typically on the school improvement plans and building relationships. And and then just to note that all board members are welcome at all committee meetings and encouraged to attend whether you are on the committee or not.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
On the staff relations, I'm confused as to what exactly their role is.
So, Bill or Rob could probably speak more to it, but every year the schools do a school improvement plan, and that is typically the liaison has been involved in working with the buildings on that. Things have been different the last couple of years because of COVID.
Did you have staff relations?
Yes.
No staff relations committee.
Oh, staff relations committee?
Relations, right.
That is negotiations.
Okay, so is there a reason it's not called the negotiating committee and a separate staff relations? Or, I mean, I'm just a little
yeah.
bit confused as to the role of the board in supporting the teachers and the staff at our schools.
So the staff relations is the negotiating committee, And that is in policy, what it's
Okay.
named and what they do.
Oh, okay. So it would have to, the policy would have to change.
Right,
Okay.
for it to be, it is kind of a misnomer there, but certainly, yes, sorry, I didn't hear your question appropriately.
Oh, no problem. No.
So, and then I just wanted to touch base with especially the new school board members, because I just heard recently that Stephanie just got her VSB invite from last year. So to make sure that everyone's on their mailing list, they're a wealth of information. I think I just saw that they have one of their school board U for new members coming up, and they have webinars all the time, as well as on-demand webinars, and they have like a new school board member toolkit. Yeah.
A book.
So, if you haven't got an email, reach out, because maybe something was lost in the address the district submits the board members to them, and we can connect that appropriately. Let's see, so also attached with this is a recommended model policy of code of ethics for school board members. And so that will also be referred to the policy committee to review and possibly adopt. And in looking at the current policies that we have and the operating protocols and kind of combining some of those. So that is another thing there. And then just.
Question on
Yeah.
that. So who might have taken care of that? Is that, if it's been updated, who was in charge of doing that?
In updating what?
The model that you're showing, you just mentioned that, the model for the
It's the
school.
Vermont School Board Association,
Okay,
their
so
model policy.
it's their usual policy and just.
It is what
okay.
they have as a model that they
Okay.
request schools to adopt, so, yes, that's where that came from. And then just for communications, obviously, anything, related to the full board, certainly reach out to me if, you're not able to attend a meeting or gonna be gone, just as a heads up. And the same thing with your committees, just to reach out to your committee chair so that everyone knows what's going on and, any questions or concerns. And of course, all communications on behalf of the school will come from Superintendent Olson, and on behalf of the board would come from myself. Certainly, everyone is an individual and can have their own conversations, but representing us as a unit will be Bill and myself. And I think that was it.
I just had one other question.
Yeah.
So how do you determine, I know it's up to the chair to assign the committees, how do you go about doing that? I mean, I had some concerns, and I know that, there felt that there was a conflict, but I was only given like one committee and others were given 4. And also some of the new people are made chair of committees. I'm just wondering how that all figures out.
So, it depends on what people's interests are, what people's experience is, and how it all fits together. And also it depends on who left and what spots were vacated to balance that all out.
I can tell you from experience, there are times when I get exactly what I requested, and times when I get nothing of what I requested. So it's, it probably has more to do with what other people want to do and what openings there are.
Okay.
The way, as she said, you can go to any of the committees.
Right.
even, so
Right.
You can still have a voice, it's just.
And just to follow up on that, do the committees vote on, like, for example, if in the finance committee, they're going to want to spend money for new carpeting, does the committee vote on it, or no, just comes into agreement with it, and then it just goes to the full board, or?
So everything has to go to the full board. Committee doesn't
No, I
have any
understand,
jurisdiction.
but I'm just wondering, like,
So
on the
they
Board of
could-
Aldermen, in a committee meeting, they vote on the members present.
Right.
Who are on the
So they could
committee.
make a recommendation to the
Correct.
full board. Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly how it
Okay.
works. Sometimes it's a little more informal than a formal vote.
Okay. Okay.
But, yeah, exactly right. Okay. So, any new business to come before the board? Ira?
No new business. I apologize. I just wanted to publicly thank Kathy for covering for me in my first finance and planning committee that I could not attend due to a pre-existing vacation.
No worries. Fun is good. Fun is good, especially after 2 years of COVID.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Allison,
Kathy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I guess I missed the unfinished business portion. So, I think it was in the February meeting that, we had some members of the public here, talking about the middle school and the issues of, student behavior and violence in the schools. And I would like to make a motion that, this be referred for an executive session, inviting, the principal and the assistant principals from the middle school. And I think the reason for the executive session would be, we would be discussing personnel issues.
I don't know that that's really the board's purview or executive session material unless,
Well, I think because we are discussing personnel issues, it would be appropriate for executive session. There were a lot of comments made and issues that were at the, from the public, that were probably not appropriate for an open session. And I'm not looking to, usurp the superintendent, but what I am looking for is for the board to work on solving this problem. I think it's gotta be something that concerns all of us. It is a very bad situation, and I would just like to see us do provide whatever support we can, not only, to the school, but also to the administration, to resolve the issue as best that we could.
so our role is higher level, where we would need to look at policies and adoption of the policies, and that is how we can provide our oversight and support to the administration. So the concern is if you start having executive sessions to talk about personnel, really those should be contracts or grievances or things that come before us, because we are a quasi-judiciary board, so we can't kind of have private conversations about our employees. I mean, certainly we could have Superintendent Olson update us on what is being done in the schools, but
I
that
just
would be
feel
public
like the
session.
taxpayers are the ones who elected people to this board, and so I feel like we have a responsibility to, delve into this and to see where the problem lies. Is there, a lack of support? Is it the school resource officer is needed more? What are the statistics, as far as police involvement, and incidents that sometimes we're just hearing from the public? And I think it kind of builds up until it becomes a situation that was at that meeting. And I think Stephanie, had brought that question up as well at the, don't recall, when you were talking about it.
I was a little upset.
Yes.
Just listening to some of the public. I think accountability is what I mean, I understand what Allison's saying, I understand what you're saying, and, there are certain things that we can and can't do, and our hands are tied in certain ways. But some sort of something in an executive session, I would agree with, just just in getting a little bit more accountability and getting the statistics, because we can't talk about particular people in public like this. So in having an executive session to just delve into it a little bit more.
We can't in executive session either.
Okay, so I'd like to add to that. I don't think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm hearing from you is you're not looking for it to be an opportunity to talk about people per se. I think what you're talking about is the feeling of things that could be improved within the school systematically. I don't think that you're looking at it from a personal perspective.
No.
You're looking at a systems change. What could we do to support you so that you're not feeling like it's all eyes on you we're not looking to blame anybody, I think is what you're saying, is we're looking to help you and support you without having Mr. Olson as a third person. Why would we talk through one person when we can talk as a collaborative group? I think is what I'm
He's our
hearing.
one employee, is Superintendent Olson, and it's his job to run the schools, and it's our job to oversee that he's running the schools, and we have to give him the opportunity to do that and to provide us with the information that we're requesting. We shouldn't be individually or as a board interacting with administration, as that's kind of overstepping what our actual role is.
So then it sounds like an executive session with Mr. Olson as to what we think could do to enhance stuff, and again, he will be the communication with his staff members.
Again, I believe it should be open session.
Allison?
Yes.
I think that one thing that we could do in policy is talk about coming up with a method of identifying exactly what the underlying problem is. Because what's going on is just a symptom of an underlying issue. And we need to really identify that issue. And the only way to do that is, well, there's multiple ways to do that, but we could talk about that in policy and bring that back to the board so that we actually start evaluating and
Right, but I think we're missing a key part of the statistics and, you know, some expertise in the area of what's going on. Why are these behaviors happening? Are these isolated incidents? You know, I mean, it was just very heartbreaking to listen to that father who talked at that meeting. And as I said, I just feel that as a school board member, we were elected to, you know, to solve some of these problems or to work on assisting him. And I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to, you know, go around or over the superintendent, but I think we have an obligation to figure out exactly what's going on. And I felt very bad for one staff member who was attacked and publicly, and I didn't feel that was the best.
Yeah, I agree there. So, but I think the avenue for us, we do talk statistics, and we have in the past, and that can all be done in open session. It's not identifying anyone, and usually, you know, every year or two, we go through the different models and steps and the interventions that are in place within the schools, and review those alongside that. So I think that would be our opportunity.
Yes,
Bill?
I think if that's something you're just interested in doing, we can do that. That is something we have done cyclically, and I think actually RMS and RHS, in that presentation, spoke to a lot of that. So we can speak to it further if you're interested in hearing more about it.
Definitely.
Stephanie?
But that would have to be an open session.
Yeah.
Regular meeting.
Two things, Isabel, you're about to step on your foot. That's not what I was gonna say, I'm like, I can see that foot. I would like to request then that we get several years of data, at least 3 years before COVID, because I know for a fact that these issues are not COVID related. They have been going on in the schools for years, so I would like to see some statistics of, I'm completely caught off guard this conversation, so. In regards to suspensions, like, how many kids have we suspended in school or out of school? And then, like, truancy rates?
Planning room type things.
Just the behavior, the overall behavior statistics, whichever, I don't know how you guys break them down. But, I mean, it is an issue that has to, at some point, get addressed, whether we have a general conversation like this, but it's an issue and it does have to get addressed, and that was one of, you know, he is our only employee, and I was actually disappointed, the fact that we didn't do a superintendent review, because he's, you know.
For 2 years.
For 2 years, not saying, you know, but some of this stuff, you know, he's the chief, so we need to, as a group, come up with a way to help the other administrators.
And there was a review done 2 years ago, just not
Yes,
this
right.
past
It
year.
was just 1 year that we didn't.
Right, Beth?
I agree, Stephanie, and I do think that review doesn't have to be a dirty word.
No.
You know, it's
Right.
I just was talking about this today with some you know, it's a positive thing. It can, you know, and I related, and I think hopefully helpful, Karen, is the idea that one of the next big things that we're going to take on in finance and planning is strategic planning. I think one of the reasons maybe Allison thought that I might be a chair for that is because I teach and have done a great deal, I teach about and do a great deal of strategic planning. Maybe I suck at it, I have no idea. You know, they say if you can't do, right, if you can't do, teach, right? So, hey, there I am.
Your rate was right.
My rate was right, right? Oh, I get it, sorry, guys. This consultant is free, okay. So, you know, I'm a big believer of, you know, the biggest problem of strategic plans is that they sit on a shelf and do nothing. And so we won't do that, you know, we will, you know, the first step is an analysis. The first step in any strategic planning process is an analysis of where you currently are. And so this will all come to light, and I'm excited to do it with Bill and with the committee, you know, to really, so this is exactly where we were gonna go, is in not just this, but in many different areas, really see, hey, where are we right now, and then where do we think we need to go? And how do we do that? How do we actually set action steps to get to where we all think that we need to be? So I think hopefully that gives us all a little bit of,
I'm
you know,
just
hope for that.
concerned about
Yeah.
probably the timeline of that.
Sure.
That's not
Oh, amen.
an
Yeah.
easy project,
Yeah.
I'm
No,
sure.
no.
This problem unfortunately has been going
Yeah.
on for so long,
Yeah.
it's gonna take several years to fix, but hopefully.
Right, but I think we have to start moving toward a solution. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road and hoping that it will go away, because it has not, and it seems that it's only getting worse.
Yep.
I would caution us to not overreact to anecdotal stories. I mean, I know from being at board meetings prior to serving, there were lots of times when we had really scary stories that were coming before the board. And then there was a period of time when we weren't hearing those stories, and now we're hearing those stories again. So
And I
the
understand.
stories are not the whole picture.
Right, and I understand that, and I understand, you know, people are coming at it from different viewpoints. But I think it has to be dealt with sooner rather than later.
And I, as a parent, have dealt with some of the issues and have seen some of the issues firsthand for the last 6 years and have met with different administrators for 6 years now. So not only have I seen it, my children have seen it and dealt with it. And I can give you some scary stories if you think those parents heard it. The stories from my one child.
I used to be a middle school
So
guidance
it's
counselor.
not,
I know those
I mean,
stories.
they're true stories. It's
Yes.
the things that have went on.
Yes.
Anyways.
So I think, you know, the best avenue for, as you know, Kathy mentioned, policy, you know, looking as we go through the policies or highlight some of the policies that could drive the change, looking at the strategic planning, and then, you know, if Superintendent Olson can get together some of the data and information and what is going on, what has changed, how are they handling it at the building levels, and present that to the board in open session, that would be the avenues that we could take.
I also might make one other recommendation. I think it sounds to me like there could be a benefit to actually having a specific committee that actually meets in regards to this, formulating another committee specific to this in ways that we maybe feel that we could be benefiting the schools, as far as, like you talked about, truancy, but actually having people come together and brainstorm what do we think would be valuable information to actually directly improve it, having a committee specific to that, so that we're allocating the time and making sure that we are in fact addressing that. And I understand that, you know, the strategic planning, but I feel like there should be a specific committee for that. So something to consider.
I know years ago, a particular principal had talked about doing like a parent, like with some teachers and some parents, and just like a community committee of sorts to kind of talk about some of the issues within the school too, but it never came to fruition.
Any other new business, old business? We combined them? No. Okay. Seeing that, I would entertain a motion to go in executive session for the purpose of discussing emergency response measures and confidential attorney-client communications, the premature release of Such information regarding these subjects would place the board at a substantial disadvantage. And wanted to include Superintendent Olson, Assistant Superintendent Bliss, and our CFO, Ted Lomenos.
Move for an executive session.
Second.
Second, okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed?
Yeah,